All right, hello and welcome. That aircon's quite loud, so I'll try and make sure I'm projecting my voice out enough. So you guys are all enrolled in the 6-week challenge, so it's to try and lose as much fat as you can and obviously maintain and hopefully even gain some muscle at the same time. Some of you, raise your hand if you're doing the fitness category as well. Oh yeah, cool, might as well. See how you go. So today I've just jotted down some points basically yesterday and just want to go over those in regards to the 6-week challenge, but I also want to try and set you up long term so you can get sustainable results. So you don't just go away from the 6-week challenge and make it another 6-week challenge. Go back to your old habits, same default ways of eating, and then get the same results. So ideally want to set you up with the systems and the knowledge to be able to go forth and then past that 6 weeks still have some good results. So that's the whole goal with today's little workshop. Should be only half an hour, 40 minutes, and then right at the end we'll do some questions to clear up anything that I haven't covered. So I'll just paint a scenario for you. Probably tried a diet or a supplement or a training plan that's given you some short-term results and you've seen some fat loss and you think, okay, that's worked. It must be the diet, it must be the training plan, it must be the supplement. And then Christmas rolls around, you've got a birthday party or a social gathering and it all goes out the window and you think, shit, okay, I'll just go back to my usual ways of eating, and you do. You gain that weight back, you gain the weight back, and then you're sort of left like thinking, what the heck? So then your mind thinks it must have been that nutrition plan or it must have been the diet that got me the results, say if it's keto, low carb, but it's not sustainable long term for a lot of these things. So we need to try and find a balance where we're working with your psychology, we're not starving you, putting you into a starvation mode, and also making sure it's attainable long term. So the first point I want to bring up is it's a big mindset thing. I'm going to skip the first point, in being that oftentimes it's hard to see the long-term results of a diet. Say if you're just losing a little bit of fat each week, you look at the scale, you get a bit disheartened, upset if you're not seeing big jumps, and hence why you don't see the long-term goal ahead. So it's all about trusting the process. And to the first point, all comes down to energy balance. Calories in, calories out. I mean, you've definitely heard that on the internet. It's such a buzzword, but it's true. It's the science of it, is that whether it's keto, whether it's low carb, high protein, low protein, intermittent fasting, they all have the same thing that makes you lose weight, and that's because they put you into a small or big calorie deficit, which means basically the amount of energy that your body burns on a daily basis makes you consume slightly less than that, which turns your body to its fat stores. And fat is really energy dense. There's 9 calories per gram. Calories is a unit of energy. So for every gram of fat, there's 9 calories, which give us the energy. So whereas carbs and protein have 4 calories per gram. So it takes a long time for our body to burn fat. So the usual advice is have a calorie deficit of between 250 to 1,000 calories per day. Now say for example 250 calories. If we did a 250 calorie every day for a whole week, at the end of the week, we'd see around a 250 gram reduction in our weight. So that's not much. You're going to step on the scale and go, 250 grams, this is nothing, like what the heck? And so that's why it's so easy to get disheartened, is because it's such a small process. And with all my clients that have successfully lost a lot of weight, we see these massive fluctuations. It goes up and down, but the general trend from week to week to week to month is that it goes down. And especially for women with hormonal fluctuations, you've got your menstrual cycle, your carbohydrate intake, salt, that all pulls water into the muscles and cells. So you get these massive fluctuations. And if you're not following a plan or some sort of process, it's just so easy to get disheartened and you lose it and you think, shit. And it's just that's the binge starve cycle. And that's what we see so much. So all comes down to calories in, calories out. So does that mean that you can eat McDonald's and still lose weight? And I've mentioned this before in one of my previous talks, but yes, you can still eat McDonald's and still lose weight. And they actually did a study on this where they took a guy, he ate McDonald's for 100 days straight in a calorie deficit. So he was burning more energy than he consumed, and he successfully lost weight. And note, I just said weight, not fat, because the weight that he lost was a bit of fat, but he also lost a lot of muscle. Muscle is so important because it's really metabolically active, meaning it burns a lot of energy at rest. So the more muscle we have, the higher our metabolism is, the easier it is to maintain a favorable body composition. And that means, i.e., more muscle, less fat. When we have more muscle and less fat, we look more toned, we feel strong, and our metabolism is high. So it's all about committing and trusting the process. So it does take a long time. So low and slow is the way to go. We can put ourselves into a 1,000 calorie deficit and lose weight quite rapidly, which you guys will probably do over the 6 weeks. But our body doesn't like this big change in homeostasis, or what's normal for the body. It essentially sees a calorie deficit as it's going to starve. It can't see past the day to day. It just thinks, right now I've got a lack of energy. I'm going to upregulate cortisol, the stress hormone. I'm going to shut down your energy pathways to try and preserve energy. So then your appetite's going to go up and your desire to move and exercise is going to go down. So that's why we have to be smart about it. We want to do it low and slow. So obviously for the 6-week challenge, it's going to be fast, but after that, I want to set you up for low and slow so that you can see long-term results. As well, if we go into a really severe calorie deficit, and we cut out lots of food, we're not eating much, we aren't fueling properly, we're not recovering properly, our stress is up, our cortisol, so then it's a vicious cycle. We get put into that fight or flight response. If we've also got kids, commitments, stress from our, who knows, partner, boss, not sleeping well as well, and then we're in a calorie deficit, there's all these inputs of stress but not much time to recover. And obviously training is a big stress on the central nervous system as well. So it's really important that we try and have something to measure and track. Otherwise we're just like stab in the dark, we don't have any metrics to follow. It is really important to, at some point in your life, from a nutritionist perspective, forgot to even introduce myself, that's quite rude. I know quite a lot of you guys, but studied 6 years down in Dunedin about 5 years ago, did my master's in nutrition, so worked with quite a lot of basketball athletes, and a big thing with the basketball athletes was relative energy deficiencies, so they're just not eating enough, and then their performance suffers, their hormones suffer, their mental state suffers as well. And it's really big in female sports because females aren't as resilient to energy deficits. So their hormones, they lose their menstrual cycle, their periods, and bone mineral density goes down, so it's really important that we fuel. So when we're going into a calorie deficit, we need to find that fine balance of not starving our body and making sure that we are getting enough nutrients, because it is so important. So measuring and tracking, it is really important to, at some point in your life, track your calories either through MyFitnessPal or a similar app, because it is a really good educational tool. Otherwise, you're so unaware of what you're eating every day. And it amazes me, people go their whole life just not really knowing much about what they eat or what's in their food. And assuming you've got a healthy association with numbers and food, and you don't get too hung up on it, because some people can spiral into a negative thing where they get too obsessed. You've got to be really careful with that. And that's why it's always good to work with a professional to assure you that what you're doing is healthy and safe. But it is really good knowledge to just track your calories and see where you're at and what food has in it. As well as that, for the 6-week challenge, obviously I've given you guys a meal plan, and if you haven't got your meal plan, come to me at the end and I'll sort you out, because it should have been sent out to all your emails via the nutrition questionnaire that you filled in. But I've basically taken everyone's weights, preferences, and given you an estimated nutrition plan or a meal plan for the week to make sure that you're in a 500 calorie deficit. So that's right basically in the middle, to make sure you are burning fat. And what I want you guys to do is try and track your weight every morning before breakfast with minimal clothing on, after going to the toilet, on your scale, and that's going to give you a reading. And you're going to see your weight probably fluctuate every day a little bit, but you should see the general trend is trending downwards. At the end of the week, it should be around 500 grams difference, which doesn't seem like much, but if you think about it, that's close to half a kilo of potential fat. In the beginning, you'll probably see that your water weight will drop, so that's why you get that big drop, and that's why people that do keto or low carb, they see that massive drop in their weight and they think, oh, this is amazing. A couple of weeks later, muscle glycogen, which is stored carbs in the muscle, gets depleted, and then they stop losing that water weight, so then it's back to baseline. So that's something you should definitely try, is weigh yourself every day or every second day to have some sort of reading to make sure you're heading in the right direction. We also want to make sure that we're not losing more than a kilo per week. In the first couple of weeks, it's okay, because like I said, it's probably water weight, but if you're losing weight really rapidly, it might seem like a good thing, but your body is very smart and it doesn't like to lose a lot of weight really quickly. So we want it to be sustainable. If you want to risk it and go all in to win the challenge, I understand that. So that's fair enough. But on to macros and micros. So who can tell me what the 3 macronutrients are? We've got carbs, fats, and protein. So fiber is also one, but fiber doesn't really contribute much calories to our diet. It's more of a brush that cleanses out our our digestive system, makes us feel full, and it pulls water as well. So carbs, fats, and protein, like I said, carbs and protein have 4 calories per gram, fat have 9. So for every gram of fat, you're getting a bit more energy. So that's why you've got to be cautious of how much fat you're consuming, as it does contribute a lot of calories to a lot of people's diets. So hence why McDonald's and takeaway foods, they have a lot of fat and carbs, which is fine, but it's not so good for if you're wanting to retain muscle as you lose fat. Hence why on that study, the 100-day study, the guy lost a lot of weight, but he wasn't retaining muscle because there wasn't as much protein in the McDonald's. So micronutrients is our vitamins and minerals. So when we're trying to look for foods, especially when we're restricting the amount that we're eating, we want to make sure that the amount of food that we are eating is really micronutrient dense, so it's got a lot of vitamins and minerals. If we eat food that's very not lacking or lacking the micronutrients, then that's when we can run into problems where we're not getting enough vitamins and minerals, which I'll get onto in a second in regards to supplements, whether or not they're actually necessary. And in regards to protein, it's such a big thing in the protein gym space. You've got to get your protein shakes, your supplements, your protein powder. So important, otherwise you're going to lose all this muscle. And recent research has shown that actually we don't need as much protein as initially thought. The previous research suggested that it was 2 grams per kilo of body weight, plus even more than that, and people were just consuming too much protein where we don't actually need that much. So the maths is that we just need 1.6 to 1.8 grams per kilo of body weight of protein. So for myself, for example, that's around, what's that, 150 odd grams. So instead of having like 200, 300 grams, we only need around 150 grams for myself, which is, I'm 65 kilos. Now back onto fad diets. Who here has tried keto before? Yep. Got one. No one else has tried keto? Okay. What about just low carb? Just trying to reduce the amount of carbs. Okay, a couple. A lot of people have tried the low carb as it's for a long time, and even still carbs are demonized as making you fat potentially. Carbs is a very complex one because carbs make up sugar and obviously complex carbohydrates as well. So that's your starchy carbs, your sugars, your honey, and when they come together, they branch out as carbohydrates. So carbohydrates obviously spike insulin, which is a storage hormone. But again, it all comes back to, it doesn't matter if we're just eating all carbs as a diet. If we're eating more calories than we burn, then we'll store that as fat. If not, we can still lose weight. But to make sure that when we are losing weight, we want to make sure we're getting sufficient amount of protein to make sure we're retaining the muscle that we've built or that we're building. So just to go over that again, the main points that I'm trying to get across here is energy balance, slight calorie deficit, and making sure that we are hitting that protein each day. And that's going to make sure that we retain the muscle. Same with, so there's fad diets. So intermittent fasting, all that does is it shortens the window or time frame of eating so that you end up eating less overall. It doesn't matter when you consume the food, it's just that from day to day you're eating slightly less again, then you'll lose weight. So that's what the intermittent fasting does, is it restricts the time window of eating. So obviously you eat less overall. There is some benefits to fasting for cognitive function. There's been a little bit of research on insulin sensitivity as well. So there's other factors to it, but the reason that it makes you lose fat is because it makes you eat slightly less from day to day, as with any other diet. We might as well cover, so on that point, do we need carbs for fat loss? Ideally, because carbs are our preferred fuel source for our brain, our body. When we're exercising, we use muscle glycogen or glucose for energy. If our body has to turn to just burning fat as fuel, dietary fat, it can increase cortisol, and it's not very favorable for our hormones, especially women are more sensitive to this with your hormone profile. You've got so many hormones at play. When we take out carbohydrates, it's just another stress for our body. And if we're trying to burn fat, we don't want more stresses. We don't want more cortisol. So that's why carbs are important. We don't need copious amounts, but just a little bit to help our body and our brain fuel for workouts. Metabolic adaptation. So sounds like a big scary word. Basically, if we've been in the starve binge cycle for years on end, what can happen is our body sees there's an ongoing problem, being that you're going through these phases where you starve yourself and your energy output's really high. So basically what it's going to do is slow down your metabolism to try and hoard the fat that it's currently got, because it thinks you're going to starve it, basically, because we haven't been very smart and we've just tried to restrict our energy so much to the point where your metabolism is slowed down. Basically, the way that we can get our bodies out of this is to give it some time to readjust. Start nourishing your body by feeding it enough calories, and we use what we call as a reverse diet. So we start adding in little amounts of food over weeks to months. Your body realizes, okay, I have an abundance of food, I can start to increase my metabolism, i.e. muscle. So you'll start to build muscle, you'll start to feel more energized, and without you even knowing it, you're going to be moving around more, you'll feel more full of energy, motivated. Your hormones will start to pick up as well, and hormones is so big, we're going to get onto that in a bit. Hormones play a huge role in how our energy levels, libido, motivation, and obviously body composition. So if our hormones are increased and optimized, then we have more muscle and less fat. So it's a really tricky one, and it's not black and white, but for the purpose of the 6 weeks, we're going to assume that you aren't metabolically adapted, and we are just going to push on with this fat loss and make sure we can lose as much fat as we can and worry about the metabolic adaptation on the other end. So I just want to make you guys aware that when we are really pushing our body and we're restricting the energy, we have 2 hormones at play. Ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone that makes us feel hungry and want to search for food, eat food, peckish, snackish. Leptin, which is the fullness hormones. That's what gets released when we eat a big bowl of pasta, say for example, especially with carbohydrates. We feel full, satiated, our serotonin is upregulated. When we really starve ourselves, say this is literally just the feeling of being hangry, you feel like punching someone, leptin is downregulated, so we don't feel full. Ghrelin is upregulated, we feel like we want to eat, we want to find food. And our body is increasing cortisol, the stress hormone, so that's why you feel a bit grumpy when you're hangry. And that's usually a constant state that we're in if we're starving ourselves. So that's why it's best to do it low and slow. Follow the plan and keep it consistent, but not too much of a calorie deficit. Cool. How much should we be working out? Now, I've had quite a few clients that go to the gym 6, even sometimes 7 days a week, and they feel like they need to do something. And it is obviously a big thing for your mental health to work out, to get the endorphins going. But if we're working out really hard every day, plus we're in a calorie deficit, which is a stressor on the body itself, long term, plus we've got, like I said, the kids, the work, commitments, etc. Long term, this is just another input of stress. So rest days are really important. And I wish I had that other board. Basically, the more we keep pushing our central nervous system, the more we get into this cycle of potentially overtraining. And then again, it does become harder for our body to relax and then burn fat. So what I want you guys to do is think at the end of the day, before you go to bed, you should be feeling relaxed. On average, you have some days where you're not feeling this, but you should feel relaxed, tired, but not stressed, and not like you have this feeling like you just want to, this uneasy feeling. You want to make sure that you're feeling relaxed and ready to go to sleep, so that when you are asleep, your body will be ready to recuperate, and then when you're in that state as well, you sleep better, so you'll be able to burn fat. So we'll get on to sleep in a bit. So the ideal amount of training, especially for muscle hypertrophy or muscle growth, is at least 2 times a week, maximum 5 to 6 times a week. And the benefit to resistance training or lifting weights is that it stimulates muscle growth, which, as we know, is so important for our metabolism, but it also doesn't increase cortisol too much, our stress hormone. So cortisol, I will say, is important in small amounts, especially in the morning, to get us up, to get us moving, to make us awake and sharp, but too much is not a good thing for weight loss, remember. So cardio, on the other hand, small amounts of cardio is okay, but cardio does directly upregulate cortisol, or the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight. So too much cardio is also not a good thing. So we want to be doing predominantly weight training to stimulate muscles and a little bit of cardio. That way we can control cortisol. On that point, we'll jump across to stress, since we're on that topic. So I see it so much, people coming into the gym and they're consuming a pre-workout or a coffee at 5 p.m. or so, and they may be able to fall asleep just fine, but the sleep that you do get into, the sleep quality will be severely diminished. So you won't get into deep sleep, and you'll just be in light sleep and REM sleep. In the deep sleep is when our body produces really key hormones, but also that's when a lot of the fat loss is done. And it's really interesting. I've been tracking it on my watch since I've had this for the last 6 months. And on the days that I feel like, I need to pick me up at 3 p.m., 4 p.m., I'll have a coffee. And then the next morning I'll look at my deep sleep, and it's literally been taken off about half of my deep sleep. And I feel fine, but actually at the end of the day I think, I'm still really tired. So it becomes this vicious cycle where you feel like you're tired, so you have a coffee to pick you up, and then your sleep isn't as good as it should be. So we want to try and minimize caffeine after 12 p.m. Why is that? Caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours. So say if you have a coffee at 12 p.m., there's 100 milligrams in coffee. At 6 p.m., there's going to be 50 milligrams still in your system because of that 6-hour half-life. At 12 p.m., there's going to be 25 milligrams still in your system. So if we have a 5 p.m. coffee or a pre-workout that has 400 milligrams, there's still going to be hundreds of milligrams of caffeine floating around in your system when you go to sleep. Same with alcohol. Alcohol puts you to sleep real fast, gets you into that light sleep really quick, but again, your body is still breaking down the alcohol, so it doesn't get you into the deep sleep. So it's really not so good for our deep sleep. If you feel like you're quite a stressed person, you get anxious as well, and you find that caffeine is not so good for you, there could be another reason why you feel stressed. We need to make sure we're not consuming too much vitamin B6 or B12. So these two vitamins are really important in small quantities and small doses, but a lot of foods are fortified with vitamin B6 and B12, like some of your almond milks, soy milks. Berocca has a lot of vitamin B6 and B12. Pre-workouts, multivitamins and minerals. So some of these pre-workouts, if you look on the back of them, it'll say 350% of your RDI, your recommended daily intake. If we're consuming excessive amounts of B vitamin 6 and 12, it can upregulate cortisol and actually make us feel stressed and worried and anxious, which can also take away from our sleep. So make sure you're not consuming too much vitamin B6 or 12. That's another big one. We'll go on to sleep. Who here sleeps at least 5 hours? Okay, 6, 7, a few hands have gone down, 8, good sleeper, 9, okay. So ideally we want between 7 and 9 hours on average. Some people can get away with less, but it actually comes down to a lot of, again, that sleep quality. So who here wakes up feeling refreshed and awake pretty much every morning? Oh, that's, yeah. So if we have a shit sleep, we're going to wake up, we're less motivated to tackle the day, but also our hunger hormones increase. Remember, our ghrelin, our leptin, we're not as insulin sensitive, meaning we can't store carbohydrates effectively in the muscles and cells. So the key principles to an amazing sleep, and I promise this will change the game for you, is blue light. Who here has their phone on them right before they go to bed? They're lying in bed. Or some sort of TV light in the background. So it is really common. Our body goes off a circadian rhythm, which is a 24-hour cycle, and it's all a lot to do with light. So our body recognizes when it's day from the sun, it hits our retina, it stimulates cortisol, wakes us up, shuts off melatonin, the sleep hormone. At nighttime, if we've got blue light coming from our phone, or actually any light, it signals to our brain it's still daytime. So of course we're not going to get that nice release of melatonin, the sleep hormone, and we're not going to sleep as well. It's like when you go camping or when you run out of power and you've just got your little candle on, you sleep so well that night. Why is that? It's because there's a much less light in the room and our brain knows when it's time to sleep. So make sure at least half an hour, but if you can an hour, start to dim all the lights, turn your brightness down on your phone, shut off the overhead lights, and you're probably going to walk into a few pieces of furniture and trip over, but that's worth the good sleep, I promise you. And the same goes with first thing in the morning. We want to wake our brain up, and this is the big thing with like Andrew Huberman, and it's big thing on this, the fitness wellness space is getting direct sunlight first thing in the morning as soon as you wake up. That's going to stimulate your wake up hormones, you'll feel more energized, but also your body has a set point of when it woke up, so it knows roughly 15-ish hours later when to go to sleep again. So it's a cycle. So we would need a dark environment to go to bed, wake up with lots of bright lights. Obviously the sun's rising later at the moment, so we want to turn on our overhead lights, make it bright in your room, try and get outside because the photons in the sun are much brighter with direct sunlight versus through a window or through our overhead lights, even on a cloudy day. So 5 to 10 minutes outside first thing in the morning. Routine, our body sets on that circadian rhythm, so going to bed at the same time each night and waking up is really important, and often that will beat the duration of a sleep versus just that consistency. Even on the weekend, you make sure you go to bed at the same time. So caffeine, environment, we need a cool, quiet and dark room, so ideally 15 to 7 degrees Celsius, but at the moment that's pretty good. It needs to be really quiet. If you've got outside noise, try and invest in some comfortable earplugs or a partner that snores. Get some mouth tape or check them out for sleep insomnia or sleep apnea, because basically if your partner is snoring, you may be able to fall asleep fine, but throughout the night if you've got this noise right in your ear or even from yourself, that's going to keep pulling you out of that deep sleep, making it harder to get a good quality sleep. And then dark room, Manta sleep mask. I love this brand. I look like a little sleep princess with my Manta sleep mask, and sometimes I even put mouth tape on. It looks ridiculous, but it really works. So you feel way more rested in the morning. So Manta sleep mask is a good one, but there's lots of others as well. Fatty, spicy food. If we have a big fatty meal right before bed, our digestive system is still breaking that down 6 hours later, because like I said, fat is really energy dense and it takes a long time for our body to emulsify the fat. If our digestive system is still breaking it down, our subconscious brain is still awake. So we want to try and avoid fatty food 2 to 3 hours prior to bed if you can. I mean, 1 to 2 hours prior to bed is okay, but try and leave a bit of time before you actually go to sleep, and you will get a much better sleep. And obviously spicy food, because that can just light up that your gut and disrupt your sleep as well. Alcohol. You probably all know people that drink a bunch of alcohol each week and are still pretty skinny. They're in great shape. They have a bit of balance. That's fine. At the end of the day, alcohol is a poison. Even if it's red wine, even if it's got polyphenols and vitamin C and red wine, it's still a poison. And that is because our body does not like alcohol. It views it as a toxin when it comes into the body, and it will take what is called priority of metabolism. I've made a little video on this. It puts the metabolism of other nutrients, being carbs, fats, and protein aside, or fat burning. It puts fat burning aside and even muscle growth, and it focuses on breaking down the alcohol. So when that's happening, it can take up to 48 hours to break down all the alcohol. So if you are going to drink, because it is obviously a part of everyone's life, and sometimes I'll have a drink as well, I'll just make sure that it is ideally clear spirits or dry red wines, because when we consume lots of food with alcohol, we're more likely to store that food as fat, because the alcohol takes the priority of metabolism. So try and not eat too much food around when you consume alcohol. Go for clear spirits, red wine, white wine, dry alcohols. And if you're going to get something sweet, get a sugar-free option. Do artificial sweeteners, are they bad for us? Research shows that they do change the microgut biome, but not necessarily in a negative way. If it's sugar alcohols, which is like a lot of these protein bars have, sugar alcohols can disrupt and inflame the gut. So that's probably why you find you get a bit bloated when you consume these protein bars. But as a whole, compared to sugar, artificial sweeteners are better for you. So especially when your priority is fat loss. It's all about what your priority is. If your priority is to make sure you've got a really healthy microgut biome, then maybe artificial sweeteners aren't the best way to go. But if your priority is fat loss, then it outweighs sugar, because sugar obviously is a really fast-acting carbohydrate. It'll increase insulin. Our blood sugar goes down, which makes us feel hungry again because it releases ghrelin. So with alcohol, try and have your diet Coke, diet drinks. Hormones. This is a big one, and I am quite passionate about, especially for guys, but also for girls, making sure our hormones are really optimized for. So number one is getting a really good sleep. Number two is making sure we're filling any gaps of certain nutrients that are really important for our hormones. Vitamin D. So important. That actually is a hormone itself, but vitamin D we need to get from ideally the sun, 20 minutes a day, which not a lot of people get. So there probably is space for you guys to supplement with vitamin D. 80% of Kiwis are suboptimal with vitamin D, so we don't quite get enough. And the best way to get vitamin D through a supplement form is a supplement that has vitamin K2 with it, because vitamin K2 increases the absorption of that vitamin D, making it more readily available. The other one is omega-3. In the perfect world, we'd all be consuming fatty fish a couple of times a week, but in reality, we just don't do that. We don't. For a lot of people, it's not financially viable, and also fatty fish is just annoying to cook, smells bad. So omega-3 supplement is really important, ideally from an animal source, because flaxseed, linseed, there's a couple of other different omega-3 sources from non-animal sources. Their omega-3 makeup is different, so it is better to get it from omega-3 from an animal source, being krill or cod or salmon. In the document that I put together for you guys, which should have been sent to you via email, I've put the links to some really cheap brands like from Chemist Warehouse that have triple strength and a really good option to go for. Zinc is another really big one, especially for males. When males have more testosterone, we feel more motivated, driven, libido, and obviously really important for body composition. So that's the same for females as well though. Females obviously don't have as much testosterone, very small amounts, but you've got progesterone, FSH, and a whole bunch of other hormones at play. Xenoestrogens. Who's heard of xenoestrogens? Hormone disruptors, estrogen mimicking compounds. So these are things like phthalates, parabens, BPA, plastic, all of these environmental hormone disruptors. So if you go into the supermarket, if you just take a second to look around and realize how much of our food is stored in plastic, it is crazy. And obviously there's going to be micro and nanoparticles that we consume that get stuck in our system. Our body, if you look at a piece of plastic, it can be 500 years old, doesn't break down. When these little compounds, micro and nanoplastics get into our body can't process them. We haven't evolved to break these compounds down. These then disrupt our hormones. So they've done research on it, especially with males. Males' natural testosterone levels have been declining the last 50 years. And fertility levels have been declining as well. There's many other factors to fertility, but it is a small contributor. So what I suggest is that you have all of your food stored in glass or metal. Never heat up plastic with food in it, say in the microwave, say these swole meals or shredded kitchen meals. Try and take the food out before you heat it up. If you heat it up in the plastic, that plastic will leach into your food, disrupting your hormones. Cans are lined with plastic. So as soon as you put an acidic food in there, like tomato, that will start to break down the lining, the BPA lining, and will break down into your food. So if they didn't have that lining, it would obviously corrode away at the metal and get rust. So that's why they'd line it with plastic. It is crazy. Even just your drinks from the vending machine, all of them are lined with plastic. So if you combine that with food that you eat from the supermarket, you're getting a ton of plastic, plus all of the parabens that you put on your skin in fragrances, skincare products. Our skin is our biggest organ. Of course, if we apply things every day, sunblock, moisturizer, shampoo, we're also absorbing it from that. So there's all these inputs that impact our hormones. So in that document as well, I've put together a xenoestrogen checklist to make sure you're just minimizing your exposure. Things like indoor candles, cleaning products, even chewing gum is a petroleum base, which is a form of plastic. So lots of these inputs. And then fragrances as well. I found this really good recently in the last couple of weeks, this brand called Able, which does completely natural fragrance, which is really hard to do. They are quite expensive, but if you want a good alternative fragrance, Able is a great brand. So when we combine these little things to our lifestyle, it may only add up to maybe 10 or 15% improvement in our hormones, our energy levels, but then we add minimizing alcohol, we are really dialed in with our caffeine and timing of caffeine, we are making sure we're sleeping better, we don't have all these inputs of stress from our training, we've got our training dialed in, we're eating enough for our body to recover, we're nourishing our central nervous system. They all add up to these little 1%ers, or actually more than that. They can have massive impacts. So when you combine all these aspects of training, nutrition, lifestyle, you'll just feel $1 million. Then plus you add in the insurance policy of making sure you are getting all the nutrients that you need from potential supplementation, which In a perfect world, we would be eating all the amazing expensive foods that we need, but it's just not a reality. Once we fix these, again, you're going to be feeling so much better. So it's all these little 1%ers that add up. So the key is to keep working away at it and make sure you're disciplined with these certain things that will have such a big return, like sleep. You've got to put sleep on a pedestal. You've got to make sure you are eating enough of the right nutrients, etc. Supplements. So do we need supplements? Especially in the gym, protein powder, pre-workout, you think you need these supplements. We do not need supplements to thrive and survive. But like I said, for people that maybe not be able to afford or don't have the time to eat all these nutrient-dense foods, supplementation can be a really good thing to make sure we have an insurance policy to make sure we are getting the right amount of nutrients from a day-to-day basis. If you've got the money as well, that can really help because supplements aren't cheap, but we don't need it to thrive and survive. We do not need, we can just get it from Whole Foods. Some of the main missing holes that I see in my clients' diets and a lot of people in the general public is, again, omega-3, vitamin D, especially in winter. And then obviously magnesium is really important only because stress depletes magnesium. If we're consuming coffee, stressful life depletes magnesium. Magnesium glycinate is a really good form. Can get it from Chemist Warehouse. I'll put that in the link in my document as well. If we help make sure we've got good magnesium stores, we'll sleep better, and that will be another great return on that as well. What was I going to say? I was going to say something. Organic foods. So do we need or should we be buying organic? Ideally, if you've got the financial capabilities to, then do. But we don't need to eat organic to be healthy. You'll see some things online and it will fearmonger you into thinking that if you're not eating organic, you're getting all these pesticides. New Zealand has really tight regulations on what they can and can't spray on food. So if you can afford it, buy organic. But if not, don't stress it. You can be amazingly healthy with just eating regular foods, making sure you're getting enough of them. So I hope that cleared a few things up for you guys. And the main reason why we're following a meal plan is to obviously make sure we've just got that consistency. Each week I'll be sending you a form to fill out to give me some feedback on how much weight you've lost so that we are tracking in the right direction. If we need to pull your calories down more or maybe increase them up, but make sure we're making steady progress. I've made a video on the meal plan to make sure if there's any questions that they're answered on the video, but if you do have any, let me know. Have you guys got any questions, perhaps supplements that you're unaware of or want to know more about, or? Oh yes, good point. Yeah, thank you. I didn't actually cover that. So again, it doesn't matter when we eat. If our priority is fat loss, we can eat one meal at night or one meal in the morning or 5 meals spread out. As long as the total amount is the same, we'll still lose fat. But when it comes to performance, we can actually optimize for when we eat to make sure we are performing really well. Again, our body uses muscle glycogen and glucose for energy, so we want to eat a nice carbohydrate-rich meal 3 to 4 hours prior to training. When we do that, we've got the leftover energy. If you train fasted without eating before training, where do you think your body will be getting the energy from for that workout? It'll be getting it from what you last ate, which was 12 hours prior, which can be fine. So if you're going to be training fasted, just make sure that your last meal, your dinner, was a nice carbohydrate-rich meal because your body will store it in the muscles, then the next morning it will use it as fuel. During training, if it's a resistance training workout, lifting weights, you don't really need to consume anything during, unless you're doing like a 2-hour plus run, marathon, or a really long training. You might need some energy because your muscles deplete their energy stores quite quickly. After an hour and a half of exercise, they'll deplete. So you might need some glucose, some lollies, some dates, some sugar to help make sure you are feeding your body. That's a very sports nutrition specific point there. But after you finish training, you want to get, again, carbohydrate-rich meal to replenish your muscle glycogen stores, but also some protein to make sure that you are giving your body the amino acids to use to then build and recover your muscles. Fat, not so important. Obviously, foods contain small amounts, most foods contain small amounts of fat. Say a steak, a chicken has some fat in it. That's more for satiety and obviously hormone levels as well, that we eat some fat. So to recap, 3 to 4 hours prior, have some carbs, and then a couple of hours, or as soon as you can after your workout, have some carbs again with a little bit of protein to make sure we're helping those muscles recover. Yes?
I always had the assumption that if you eat regularly, then that helps your metabolism.
Yeah.
True or not true?
Not true. Yeah. So your body's very smart at picking up how much energy it's getting each day. So if you ate all your food just in one meal, it'll realize that it's got sufficient energy. If you start then making that meal smaller and smaller, it'll pick up that you're not giving it enough energy from day to day. But yeah, that's been debunked.
Yeah.
The whole thing about if you don't have breakfast, you need breakfast to get your metabolism fired up. Yeah, it's not true. So that's why intermittent fasting works as well, is obviously it's not so much about consistently eating, it's just more that it's restricting your window of eating.
Yeah.
And I will go back to carbohydrates. They can really help stimulate your metabolism in that sense, where what I mean by that is they do release these hormones a lot more than fats or protein. So carbs release leptin, the fullness hormone. That's why you feel so tired and sleepy after a big carbohydrate rich meal, is because it releases insulin, and leptin reduces cortisol. So that's why it's also important to just make sure we are getting a little bit of carbs in our diet, or enough carbs in our diet to make us feel full, fuel our workouts. Any other questions?
I like the protein bars and protein powders. Are they, like you mentioned something about sugars and protein bars?
Yeah.
So are they not that good for you?
Well, the thing with protein bars and even protein powder is that they're a great form of protein, really convenient, really tasty. When possible, we want to try and take a food first approach, because whole foods contain more micronutrients per gram. We want to try and get as much bang for our buck. The protein bars and powders are a refined form of protein, so they don't have a lot of the nutrients in them like a whole food would, like a steak or legumes, for example. The protein bars are a great convenient option, but if you can get whole foods, go for that. And when I said they've got sugar alcohols, that's just a type of artificial sweetener. There's sugar alcohols that are very sweet on the tongue. But most protein bars and protein powders don't actually contain any sugar as such. They are just a form of protein. But if you enjoy protein powder, you want to put it in a smoothie with other food like berries or yogurt, then that's when it can make up for the lack of nutrients. So, and for most people as well, it's like getting enough protein can be, for some people, a hard thing. So that is where protein powder can be necessary to fill the gaps. So again, if we can't fill our bucket up with whole foods, micronutrient dense foods, then sometimes it is necessary to supplement with certain vitamins or minerals or protein powder. But we don't need protein powder to get the results. And yeah, with the meal plan, I've just put in, I cover it on the video, but basically breakfast, lunch and dinner, if it's in the same category, you can interchange the meals and you can have one meal the whole week, or you can go between the two, because I've calorie counted them all out, so to make sure they're all the same. And for every category, based on your weight, I've made sure there's the right amount of protein, carbs and fats in there. So if there's a meal that you don't particularly like and you want to swap it out, you can just look at the calories and make sure the meal that you do get, just roughly make sure it's similar calories and go from there.
Does it have the calories written on it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's on the meal plan. How much calories it's got, carbs, fats and protein. So again, think back to, it's not so much about the actual recipe or the food or the diet, it's more about the energy balance. So it is interchangeable. You can choose a different meal, a different food, and as long as it's similar calories or making sure that you're hitting your goal calorie intake, then you will get the results, assuming that protein is accounted for. So, any other questions?
Oh, Coke Zero.
Yeah. So, Coke Zero. So, Coke Zero, a few things. It's obviously, we've got a couple of things here. Artificial sweeteners,
Yeah.
caffeine, which is fine, but also if it's in a can, again, lined with plastic, which over time, or a couple every now and then is fine, but if we want to try and minimize our xenoestrogens, maybe we go for a glass, which is a bit more expensive, obviously, a glass Coke Zero. Caffeine, totally fine to have, but make sure that it's not too close to bed in the afternoon, because even 20 milligrams, if we have a couple of those or just one, 6-hour half-life of caffeine might be inhibiting your sleep. Same with black tea, green tea has caffeine, so just be careful about that. But totally fine to consume. Again, there will be slight changes in your microgut biome, but it's not necessarily negative changes. And they've done so many studies on Coke Zero and artificial sweeteners, and the people that make sure that they're in a calorie deficit, following the basics, they lose heaps of weight as opposed to consuming sugary beverages. So, yeah. So in other words, keep drinking them, but just be aware of the caffeine and the plastic in the can. So. That's a really good point. Again, it's we really want to try and look at fat loss from a week-to-week perspective. So say all throughout the week you're doing really well. Might just rub that off. And so say each day of the week you're doing really well, you're hitting your calorie budget, but say on the Saturday you go way above what you should have eaten. Because our body, we like to look at week-to-week fat loss, what we can do is, like you say, we could work out to bring that energy excess down. We could increase our energy output to bring that down to back where we were. Or we could also, the next day, just eat slightly less to compensate. Because again, it's not going to make a huge impact because it's that week to week that we want to look at. It's that total week volume of calorie intake. So it's why it's really important not to get disheartened by just one day. Just make sure the next day you get back to where you were before if you'd like. But if you don't compensate, that's totally fine. It just might take a day or two for your body to readjust. But don't get disheartened. That's where a lot of people think, oh, I've blown it. I might as well just starve myself. Don't do that. Just be smart about it. Go back to where you were eating here, or you can just slightly pull down the calories the next day. And that's why I say if you're going to eat out one night, totally fine to enjoy yourself. Have a bit of alcohol. You can indulge. Just make sure maybe that day that you maybe skip a snack, or maybe just pull down your calories in your meal, or don't even do that. Just don't worry about it. Just add another 10 minutes of your workout, or the next day, slightly reduce your calories, and so on. So it's really trying to just not take an extreme approach, and I'm so much about balance when it comes to certain foods. I really love sweet food, chocolate, ice cream, and I truly believe that you can eat anything and still achieve your results, assuming you've just got the fundamentals down pat, like your sleep, getting enough micronutrients, getting enough protein. The rest you don't have to worry about. Did that make sense for you guys over there? I don't actually know if you can see that. Sweet. Yeah, that's a good question though. Yeah. I think that's all. That's bang on an hour as well. So yeah, again, if you haven't got your meal plan, just hang around and I'll grab your emails and send it out to you and make sure that we're sorted. But if you haven't already, fill out the nutrition questionnaire. In fact, I'll get you guys all to do that. If you haven't got that, just hang around and I'll fill that out. I'll get you guys to fill that out. So awesome. Good luck for the 6 weeks. Again, you'll be receiving a questionnaire each week to let me know how you're going and make any adjustments. So thank you guys for coming. Cool.
Is that nutrition questionnaire one we've already done?
Yeah, I think you would have received it probably like a week ago.
Yeah, we filled it out for the meal
Perfect.
plan.
Yeah. Have you received any emails?
Yeah, I've got
cool.
them, but just with that B6 and B12 intake, what's the limit daily then?
So that's a good question. I'm not actually sure exactly what the amounts are, but I'll find out and I'll send you.
Okay,
yeah. But what you can do as well.
I just want to check to make sure I've got a few supplements that I'm not overdoing it.
Yeah, because sometimes if you're having a Broca.
Like I only have like a Energy X supplement and a couple of them, but I just want to make sure that I'll read them and make sure there's not too much on them.
Well, even if you look on the back of some of them, they'll say 200% of the RDI, and that's how you know if it's 200%, that's fine. But if it's like 200% there, 200% there, and there.
Yeah.
So
just checking that.
Yeah, but I'll find out for you and let you know,
Okay,
because that's a really good point.
I haven't received the meal plan.
Oh, okay. Have you got an email with the questionnaire that came through to you?
I did it.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Okay. What was your email?